Okay, shalom. We went
Shalom.
to practical parsha. This week is Parshat Matot and Massei. In our book, it's on page 434. We're starting at chapter 30 in the book of Bamidbar, Deuteronomy. I'm not Deuteronomy. Forgive me. Numbers. Forgive me. We're almost in the book of Deuteronomy. In fact, this Shabbat, which is mostly, I should say, quite typical, that we read these two parshiot team up together. They become twins. They become conjoined. And it really completes and finishes the fourth book of the Torah, which essentially, and we'll talk about it, I guess, next week, is let's just say, the main part of the Torah. And then next week you go into Deuteronomy. Having said that, I want to focus exclusively on matters of this parsha. Before I begin talking about the actual laws, the practical laws that pertain to this parsha, I want to remind you, they say don't try this at home without adult supervision. Okay? So what I mean to say is, remember, I keep on reiterating this, it's very important. Remember that everything that we discuss here is only really a sampling. Okay? It's not a comprehensive review, not even an abridged review of the laws and the matters that we discuss. I just want to give an idea. In other words, when we learn the Parsha, when one reads or studies the Parsha, the biggest danger, and I think the biggest problem is when we end up reading it as something historical from the past or something abstract. No, the idea is, remember, as stressed, Torah. What is the word Torah?
Instruction.
Instruction, Hora'ah. And therefore, even though the Torah appears to be as a story or as, giving us some facts, but the truth is that it's direct instruction for our life. Many times, not always, but many times, it's quite obvious because it's clear laws, what to do, what not to do, how to do it, how not to do it. Then there are times when one has to work a little more, a little extra, put in a little more effort, or do the proper research in finding out what it is that the Torah is trying to tell us to do and not to do through the means of telling us a story, relating a historical fact, and so on and so forth. In this case, it's very easy, it's very obvious. Let's start. Moshe spoke to the tribal leaders. Now, we're not going to get into why he spoke to the tribal leaders, but he spoke to the tribal leaders of the Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, saying. Saying means that he told them that they have to go now and repeat it to their respective tribes. This is the word that Hashem has commanded. If a man makes a vow to Hashem, or makes an oath, to initiate a prohibition on himself, he may not profane his word. And, what does it say? Continues, is very, very powerful words. He shall do all that he said. If I was actually to translate the Hebrew literally, everything that comes out of his mouth, he shall do. And he replies to he and she. He is just in the neutral gender. So, what we're going to learn over here are the laws of nidarim, vows. Okay? When one takes a vow. Or shivu'ah, which is quite similar, one takes an oath. I just want to go through the basic idea of what it is, what it's not, what impact it has, and what effect it has, what in our lives, day to day, what we should or should not do, what we should avoid, and so on. So let's first start. What is really the concept of an oath? What is an oath? In other words, how do we categorize it? What exactly describes an oath? In plain, simple words, an oath is when you take what's called a davar hamutar, something that is permissible otherwise, and you have the power with your words, with accepting upon yourself something, you have now the power to turn it from something permissible to something prohibited. Okay? Meaning, by the virtue of you making the oath, you have now made it prohibited. It may be permissible for everybody in this world, every single person except for you, because the Torah gives power to your words, especially when you mean what you're saying. I'll get into it soon. But assuming that we made the oath, you understood what you're saying and you said it with your whole heart, that now becomes prohibited. This is a very, very, very special power. This is the power of the word is absolutely amazing as it's exemplified here. In fact, it shouldn't come as a shock. If you want to think about it esoterically, the word, meaning a word, is very, very powerful. Where do we see it? Well, in the book of Genesis, it says, let us make man in our image. Of course, it doesn't mean literally that God has a long nose and has hair or curly hair or straight hair and so on and so forth. But it means that man and the behavior of mankind replicates to some degree, some imaginary degree, the powers of God. And that is really a gift. That's not something, by default, God had no choice. God chose to give us some powers that somehow mimic, emulate His infinite powers. Now, how did God create the world? How did He choose to create the world? Obviously, He wasn't forced to do so. Nothing forced Him. What did He do to create the world? It says continuously, and God said, and God said. And that tells us really the tremendous power of the word. I know I'm jumping ahead, but it also serves as a lesson, even if one should never, ever, ever engage in an oath or in making a vow, which is really, really a big, big problem, especially in our society as people are just accustomed to speaking today. But the idea that what I say is powerful. What I say can have an effect, good or bad. What I say really, really can, in the sense of being similar to God, can either create or destroy. And this, I'm speaking to myself too. We all need to be more careful with what we say, with how we say it, and then there's also certainly what we mean with what we say, and so on. But getting back to the idea of taking something permissible, something which is absolutely, I would call neutral. Neutral meaning, okay, let's say a piece of kosher meat. I can eat it, I cannot eat it, right? Now, obviously, if it's Yom Kippur, I can't eat it because I can't eat anything on Yom Kippur, unless God forbid I'm sick, right? If I just ate milk, I can't eat it because I just ate milk. But we're talking about it when it's in a state of neutrality. There's nothing wrong, because it's fine, it's kosher. And for whatever reason I decide I want to refrain from eating meat, or I make an oath. Today's Wednesday. Of course, I don't mean the words I'm going to say now, but if I say I am prohibited from eating meat every Wednesday, or meat is prohibited on me on Wednesdays, it becomes prohibited on me. You're like, but what? That's the power. That's the power. The person has the power of the word. In fact, the sages tell us that an oath really only applies to something that is similar to a sacrifice. What does it mean, something that's similar to a sacrifice? Something which is inherently forbidden, something which is anyway prohibited, the oath doesn't apply to it. It's an empty oath. It has no value. Even to the extent, let me give you an example, even to the extent of, let's say, for example, a Jewish person should make an oath that ham is prohibited on me. Okay? In other words, they just made an oath that they're not allowed to eat ham or pork, whatever, right? And how about, God forbid, if they went ahead and they did eat the ham? Would one say that, look, now, besides the fact that the Torah says it's forbidden, now you have another issue where the person made an oath? And the answer is no. That oath does not stick to that, because that's prohibited. That's inherently prohibited. The only time the oath can really have an effect is something which is similar to a sacrifice. What is the idea of a sacrifice? You take an animal which is intact, which is not in any way holy, and now by consecrating it, by dedicating it, by contributing it as a sacrifice, it now becomes holy, and now it's off limits. Now you cannot eat from the flesh, you cannot derive any benefit from it. That is what an oath is. Now we go to the next stage. The question is this a good thing, or is it a bad thing? Is this a good thing? In other words, is it a good thing for a person to make oaths? or to restrict themselves from certain things, or in order to kind of maybe protect themselves from any fallout of, I don't know, indulgence or whatever it is, and they kind of figure they'll make a very stronger line, a red line, a real red line, not like our politicians make, but like make a red line by accepting themselves another line of prohibition, another 2 lines of prohibition, in order for maybe they have certain weaknesses. Now it's interesting, when you look at the Talmud, it almost comes out, it almost appears as if there's a debate. Because in some place the Talmud suggests that one who does an oath is like a sinner, and there's sense behind it, especially when we look at it from a Hasidic perspective, from a mystical perspective. What does it mean when something is permissible? What does it mean when something is, like I said before, neutral? That means that it's available for your consumption. It's available to you. If it's available to you as a Jew, what that means is that you can now elevate it. When you eat from that, let's take the example I gave before, when you eat from that piece of meat, and that piece of meat now becomes part of you. A, you've made a blessing before, blessing after. B, even especially if you may have eaten it in itself for a mitzvah, which let's say was a Shabbat dinner, or it was a festive meal, so this is already a mitzvah. But even not in that case, if I'm going to now use that energy to now serve God better and be a better person and be more compassionate to others and so on, now I have the energy, now I have the stamina, I have now elevated that. But if I have now restricted myself from it, so in a sense that's a sin. I've taken something that God gave me a potential, an opportunity to elevate, and I've cut off its chance of being elevated through me. So then, in that sense, in that vein, it's a prohibition. It's not a good thing. It's not a good idea, and it's something which should be negated. Yet, on the other hand, it does come out, again in the Talmud, by certain statements of some of the sages, that one who does an oath is an extra act of sanctity, of Kedusha. Make up your mind. Is it good? Is it bad? The answer is, like in most questions, and it seems like you have somewhat of a contradiction, and I'm not talking about when you're in this politician, but what is really the best answer? Depends. No, this is not a joke. Not, okay, depends. Depends on what? Let's elaborate. Depends what type of person we're talking about. In other words, depends on what level a person is. If a person is, God forbid, wild, out of control, crazy, and that has led them, and that has been perhaps the reason, the catalyst for their dysfunction, their spiritual dysfunction, their societal dysfunction, and maybe even worse, for their terrible transgressions, then it might actually be a virtue. If this is their way, if this is their means of harnessing themselves and harnessing that crazy, wild bug that they have in them, then at least for the initial stages of them rehabilitating, it's actually a virtue. It's actually something to be invited to say, put yourself certain restrictions, providing that you keep them. However, when one's already on a normal, so to speak, in a normal altitude, one's not need to climb that aggressively. One already is there in an altitude, in a healthy place, then, what I said before, restricting yourself from something that has potential in becoming closer to Hashem, in becoming elevated, is a negative, not a positive. Okay? But what we just discussed is, however, more of the, what I would speak, philosophically speaking. Okay? But bottom line is, if one did an oath, regardless of who it is and who it's not, an oath is an oath. Okay? An oath is an oath. Okay? And I already mentioned about the fact that, words are very, very important. Okay? You see something from the word. What does it say? What did it say in the middle of verse 3? He should not profane his word. So we see that an oath, the matter becomes a matter of kodesh, of holiness. It becomes like a sanctified thing. A sanctified thing. What does the word kodesh mean? The opposite of profanity, the opposite of profane is holy. What is really the true definition of holy? The true definition of holy is that it's separate. It's beyond. That's what really holy means. Removed. Okay? That means it's totally out of reach. Okay? That's how serious a oath is. That's how important it is. Okay? I actually want to tell you that although the Torah speaks about here about making an oath, saying an oath, keeping a word, the truth is, and this is something extremely important, and that's why it's very commonplace in Jewish practice, and I'm talking about day-to-day talk, that according to the laws of nidarim, of oaths, if one actually does what's called hanhaga tova, literally a good conduct, meaning a good practice or a good custom. One started to be a little extra diligent in something, or as one develops a new habit of study, or adds a new stringency when it comes to Jewish law. If you do it 3 times, that can very well constitute an oath. In other words, that expresses what's in your mind, that you have intended to develop a pattern, to accept it upon yourself. To stop doing it could almost be tantamount to defiling one's word, one's oath. And that's why it's commonplace in Judaism when one says and accepts upon themselves to do something, or if one begins doing something extra, a stringency, a custom, or whatever it is, to actively express verbally that this is beli neder. Beli neder. Get used to those words. Beli means without. That means this is not neder, an oath. A vow, forgive me. Beli neder. This is not a vow. Okay? And that's why it'd be very, very typical for people to go, are you going to come? And go, yeah, I'll be there, beli neder. Meaning, I don't know what's going to happen. You know what I'm saying? I intend to be there. And at that level, we need to really appreciate that really, and sadly, society no longer respects it. I mean, when you hear from people that once upon a time, and I'm not talking about 3,000 years ago, and I'm not talking about even 300 years ago, but people did business on a handshake. Okay? People did business on a handshake. Now, I'm sure that at that time there were also certain people that you knew not to do a handshake and not to get close to their hands, and not to let certainly their hands get close to you. But your average person, a word was a word.
Oh, yeah.
A commitment was a commitment. A promise was a promise. A deal was a deal.
Yeah.
And of course, there was never such time that there weren't thieves and liars. But the question is, who was the minority? Okay? Were the liars the minority? The very, very small minority? Or, unfortunately, the reverse? You know what I mean? The few people that, like, the few, how would society call it? The few losers that keep their word, that really, really stick to what their commitment was. But the truth is that in the Torah, if you say you're going to do something, even if you didn't say I swear, even if you didn't take an oath, you didn't make a vow, the fact that you committed to do something is what it fits into these words. Whatever comes out of your mouth, you should do. Whatever comes out of your mouth, you should do. Even to share a story with you, just to share a story with you, that there have been many, many, great, great people that had their own private customs or whatever. But there's a story about a certain rabbi who later became famous as a very big Hasidic master. But in his younger years, meaning before he became famous as a Hasidic master, he had, his own special way, exclusive way of serving Hashem, something which is not for the ordinary person, even for the extraordinary person. This is something above and beyond, with the record. That's why he became a Hasidic master later. And apparently one of the things that he did was he fasted from Shabbat to Shabbat. There was some great, great tzaddikim who went on to do that. This is totally off limits for anyone, because we can't handle it. But he would fast basically Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And of course Shabbat he didn't, and every day he just ate at night. So he fasted during the day, and this was his service. Apparently once he overheard, he had a guest or something, maybe it was a relative, maybe it was his father, maybe it was something, and he overheard his wife saying that, oh, he's fasting, he fasts. And of course, because of his extreme humility, he didn't want the person to say, he walked out, and he said, what do you mean I'm fasting? And he started to eat. And from then on, every week, that same time, he would eat something. You understand? Because he says, what do you mean? I eat at this time. What are you talking about? That's how careful he was with his word. That's how careful he was. Okay? So the idea that, people can just say, I just said it. No, you just said it. Come back here. What does that mean? You know what I mean? What impact does it have? Okay? And the truth is, I have to say this. I just feel compelled to say it. We have tremendous advantages. I want to tell you something. You see something amazing. As society declines in its integrity, I'm talking about morally speaking and ethically speaking, but God always provides us. You see how always, it says in the Talmud, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be here, he, Magdim, he always prefaces, Refuah, Refuah means the medicine, the healing agent, Lemaka, to the affliction. I want you to think of it in these terms. As society becomes more and more callous towards the power of a word, what it means, people just say things, people just commit to things, I promise you. Besides the fact that I can't even take it, I'm just saying it for illustration purposes. People walk around, which is really one of the 10 Commandments. I swear to God, I swear. Please. Even if it's true, you're not allowed to swear. Swear and not to swear to God. But I'm talking about even just ordinary commitments. Yes, I'll do what I want. I'm coming, I'm not coming. And the disregard for the value of a word, for the value of the impact of what someone says. So here is where God gave us the refuah. He gives us the healing agent. Not only at the time, but already before the illness. Where do you see it? As society becomes more and more ill, becomes more and more callous towards the power, towards the sanctity of a word, we have science that actually illustrates the power of a word. Whereas maybe just a number of years ago, it was not so widely known. Certainly if you go back 100, 200 years ago, people would have laughed at you if you ever suggested such a thing, and to look at you as a Looney Tune. But not only when you have an electrical spark or a radio wave as we know them, is there some impact, is there some residue that's being left in the atmosphere. The word, when you say a word, there are waves created, literal physical waves. You can't see them, they cut right through you, so you don't think it's there. But if you have the means, you have the apparatus, you go through a science lab, you can actually pick them up. Not only you can pick them up, those waves travel and travel and travel to the other end of the world. So theoretically, if somebody had the right apparatus at the other end of the world, they can pick up what I'm saying right here. Maybe not now, it might take some time to travel, but it's there, it's in the atmosphere. So don't tell me it has no impact. So here, what Hashem does, He helps us overcome that downturn, overcome that callousness. That if somebody really wants, if somebody really applies their thinking, I'm talking about healthy, rational thinking, you go, the word is very powerful. Very powerful, extremely powerful. Anyway, moving on.
Maybe we should be careful what we say,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Very.
Absolutely.
You can create war or you can create peace.
Yes.
Just with your words.
So you just reminded me. talking about the just look at the time. Talking about the power of a word. So the famous story, which is like a homiletic tale of that really illustrates, exhibits the power of the tongue, the power of the speech, where there was once a king who was deathly ill. And it came to the point that all medicines that were available at the time, all potions were basically futile, useless. Nothing can work. They had the best doctors there. Money was no object. And finally, one exotic doctor showed up and he said to the king, I think there's only one thing that can help save the king's life. However, it's most probably almost an absolute impossibility. Why? Because there's almost no way of getting it. What is that? The milk of a lioness. If you drank from that milk, you'll be healed. Instantly. You go find a lioness to look at. Hello, can I just have a little milk? Man, just a little bit? Yeah, sure. Just give me a minute here and, you know.
Especially next to her
Yeah,
cubs.
I'll give you a free voucher to the mall, man. Yeah, sure. Okay, so how do you go about it? So the king put out word and he was offering. Imagine, the word got out there, there's advertisements all over the street, all the, what do they call them, the announcers. $10 million prize for anybody who can bring a jug of lioness milk to the king. $10 million prize. So, those who were brave at heart started to, let's just say, entertain the idea. But very, very quickly, let's just say, it didn't take that long. And most people were like, nah, they can't. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Remember, they didn't have the means that we have today available to them, with tranquilizing darts and things like that. So you got to be able to really strategize, get close to the overwhelm it, tie it down. One brave guy said, I'm going to do it. And he was strong, he was quick, he was obviously very brave, maybe a little stupid too, but that's okay, that helps. And he set out, and sure enough, it took him a little while, it took him more than he would want to, but about 8 or 9 days later, he had that vat of milk. Now it's fresh. Better make it back very quickly to the king, because it still has to remain fresh. And he's going to save the king's life. Besides making the $10 million, imagine, be the hero of the whole country. He saved the king's life. Anyway, he's traveling till he's just so exhausted that he collapses, he falls asleep, and in his sleep he has a dream. And in the dream, his body is rejoicing. Everyone's rejoicing. When I say everyone, every body part. The hands, the feet, the mind. And you know how parties can get a little wild, and suddenly it turns into a quarrel, an argument. And the hands are suddenly like, guys. I'm the hero here. You? What are you? Because I'm the one who milked the thing. I'm the one who tamed that lioness. And without me, you guys wouldn't be partying, so just don't forget who's boss there. The feet are like, really? How would you have gotten there without me? Mm-hmm. And each part of the body started arguing. The head was like, yeah, really? You guys like, yeah, hello, good tools, but I'm the mastermind here. And the heart is like, look, if I would have gone nuts, you would have just lost everything. Everyone was arguing, each one was saying, I'm the hero. And finally, after everyone was done fighting and arguing, and they made their point, the tongue pops up and goes, guys, I'm the most important part of the body. Yeah, what do you got to do with anything here? Like, please, go back to go back to where you came from. He says, I'm telling you guys, and if I have to prove it to you, you're going to regret it. And they all started laughing. Now they all unified. They're commenting, you idiot, what's it got to... Okay, I'm going to show you. Well, it didn't take long. After such a crazy dream, he was up, ready to go. A few hours later, he's at the palace gate. He's like, look, guys, I have the vat. They opened the gate, rushed him right into the king, gave the king to drink. And as the king's about to drink it, the king says, so where's this milk from? He goes, well, obviously it's from a kalba. Kalba, in Aramaic, means a dog. What? On the spot, the guy was whisked away and put into a cage, and to make a mockery of the king, to make a mockery of him. Not only is the king ill, so deathly ill, and they were going to hang him publicly. It was just a matter of having everybody come out to the square to watch this blasphemous, disgusting thing be hung in public. that night he's trying to get some sleep. Really, this is his last final hours.